En un país en el que decenas de miles de pequeñas y
In a
medianas
country with
empresas del sector
tens of
industrial han quebrado
small and
en
medium
3 años continuos de estancamiento
companies
económico, con impuestos que clasifican entre
that
los
have
más
lived
elevados del mundo,
years
han
of
aumentado un 30% en esta
economic
década de
stagnation,
recesión, con una clase media que está desapareciendo
with
y
a
un
middle
problema
class that's
casi
disappearing
ha brotado desde la periferia, desde las regiones olvidadas, desde el campo, zonas periurbanas y ciudades medianas, con
from
una
the small
expansión
towns of the
crescente,
country,
una indignación,
from
una cólera
the
que ha hecho
countryside.
tambalear estructuras y cimientos que incluso esa misma
Anger
clase media
has
creó.
emerged
Es Francia, a fuerza de
to attack the
movilizaciones, un
structure of
poder
France.
que primero se mostraba al mundo inflexible, altivo y hasta victorioso, ha decidido declinar como quien intenta
A country that was
desactivar la bomba de
victorious
tiempo que activó. Tarde
in front
para
of the
hacerlo,
world
cuántas réplicas
is
más
living a
podrán
crisis
estar
now.
dentro y afuera. El Ejecutivo podrá seguir jugándose esa dolorosa carta de la represión.
Can the executive power play repression? Is this an attack to inefficient capitalist system? Middle and low classes are working against capitalism and financial globalization. What does it mean that one of the main pieces of Europe and capitalism, France, is living turmoil today? That's our topic today. We will review the main events now. All the eyes on France, because on Saturday, December 8th, new mobilizations of the Yellow Vests are expected, and more mobilizations in different locations of France. Around 90,000 security staff to be deployed in Paris, in the whole country, and only 8,000 will be working in Paris. Museums, parks, local shops will be closed due to its fear to these mobilizations and protests. Ligue 1 of France, the soccer league, will be suspended during this weekend. Macron got 4 points less in his popularity rates. And it's even lower than his predecessor. Well, we don't get what we want. Every Saturday we will protest. I came last Saturday and I will come here every Saturday while the government is not making an effort. Humankind should be before money. This cannot continue. Whenever you don't have enough to get to the end of the month, you're blocked, and then you notice that there are older people that even fought for France that got 800 or 900 euro and can do it to the end of the month. That's amazing. Incredible. I see many people, especially in the provinces, with vests, red and yellow, working together. We haven't changed. We think that social issues are urgent, and we are waiting for responses from the government. By now, everything has stopped. The taxes that are planned for next January cannot intervene in this. We need the reasons to make this argument believable, credible. We're not only discussing ecological taxes. It's not about economy and taxes, economy versus taxes. It's about how can French people purchase basic products. Let's check the last events. Spontaneously in France, a new movement, the one of the yellow vests, was born, called because of the vests that they wear. A yellow vest that every motorcycle driver must use in case, just to be seen in the roads. It's horizontal, leaderless, and it's in the margin of unions and political organizations. This protest started on November 17th and have lasted over 3 consecutive weeks. They demand the government backtracks on a diesel tax. The prices are already really high, and other reasons that were added are reforms, taxes, and price hikes. This is why the citizenship are protesting. Repression from security forces have used tear gas and water cannons. It have left hundreds of wounded and detained. Citizens have been self-organized by social media. Macron justifies laws on alleged profit of millions of euros, but he was forced to delay these measures for 6 months and then to definitely stop this. These protests have damaged iconic places like Arc of Triumph, Champs-Élysées, and there have been decreases in revenue of hotels, local shops and restaurants. Over 100,000 people have participated. There have been around 600 protests across the country, and people are justifying their protests. But the government have alleged that they are linked to crime. Is Macron's government at risk? We must also ask this. We go to check RT in Spanish. Many parties of the left are together to present a motion to censorship the French government. Among these participants are the French Party, Insumisa, and the Communist Party and Socialist Party. Parties which used to rule the country before the elections of 2017. These parties have joined this initiative, and even after the government decided to step back, they still want to censorship the government. Euronews say the effect of the yellow vests. Which other countries have this movement reached? We find a description that says, for example, Serbia. A member of the opposition in Serbia wore a yellow vest during the Serbian parliament to protest for the high prices of fuel. The boss of the nationalist right of Serbia also spoke in favor of this movement. Iraq also witnessed people wearing yellow vests and protested in the streets against the government. In Belgium, the yellow wave reached the north of France and reached the center of Brussels. Local media said that around 400 protesters marched around the capital to protest. Now we go to a recommendation of the Voltaire Network, saying the West eats its own children. Thierry Meyssan is a French intellectual, and he says the West have directed the world for almost 5 centuries, and it will end up sinking in a series of inner conflicts. French people are the first ones to rebel against the destruction of the West, even if they don't have conscience of their fight, which is actually fighting against the enemy, the only enemy of all humankind. He also talks about the limitations that the US have put against the rest of the world. And now we review the text. The world needs to create a new organization, or if not, the Western ways that have ruled the world for more than 5 centuries will end up sinking. This was the text by Thierry Meyssan. The streets are hot in France. Now we will connect to our correspondent Sergio Rodrigo in Paris. Sergio, let's talk a little bit about the last events. Let us know what is expected for the next hours. There is a lot of expectations on this. The insurrection, rebellion in Paris by the Yellow Vests have called protests for Saturday the 8th. It will start at 10 a.m. Paris time against the government of Emmanuel Macron, against his neoliberal policies and the cuts applied by the government. People are in the streets rejecting this, protecting their salaries, pensions, and social rights of the French citizenship. The people is not convinced by the actions that Macron has taken by stepping back in his policies. They don't believe in that. The Yellow Vests insist on having a pacific mobilization. They think that Macron is encouraging civil war. The government tries to criminalize this movement and have deployed thousands of units to repress. Eiffel Tower has also been closed, and the protesters have been strongly repressed by the government. Social movements are trying to develop a protest in a normal way, in a peaceful way, against public salaries, social justice, and against the spirit of civil war that Macron is feeding. The Socialist Party, the left-wing parties, are trying to look for support to stop the advance of the neoliberal policies of France. They need 280 votes to approve this censorship motion. It's important to know what's going on in France, to take a look of the general panorama of France as an international key factor for politics. Is this attempt of the government to step back in its decisions going to stop the intentions of protesters to keep mobilizing, or will it steam up more this anger? We go to a break and then we will be back with our analysts. Sputnik says civil war, transatlantic civil war. What is behind the mass protests in Paris? The intentions of French President Emmanuel Macron seem to of creating a common European army are hiding the reasons for which he must be punished in France. Steve Bannon, the chief of his campaign, has expressed his negative attitude against Macron and accused him of betraying the interests of France. That's how Sputnik talks about this. We still need to ask more about this to our analysts. Is the French economy untouched from this decay that started in 2008? Emmanuel Macron won elections a year ago by telling the people that he was gonna work for the trust that they put on him. But now we can see the next thing. Serious employments in France have been reduced. The new workplaces are temporary or precarious. The workers don't receive proper benefits like social security, and they're not receiving the basic salary, which is supposed to be 1,700 euro, which seems high for the rest of the world, but it is low for the people in France. According to its economy, more than 700 million euros should be invested for social security. But we can see that France has one of the most repressive systems. 20% of the people that win most of the money in France is 5 times higher than the rest of the salaries in the country. 5% of homes have had to reduce their purchase power. Many reforms have been made by Macron. One of the most polemic ones, controversial ones, is the labor reform, which is why the people have protested in the streets. They have enforced some layoffs due to a really risky economical situation, and there will be inequality in negotiations between employers and employees. One of his campaign promises was to reduce unemployment to 7%, but after all this year, unemployment is higher than 7%. Macron is cutting taxes for some companies in order to motivate them to invest, but we still have to see what is going to happen with this. I want to call to our guests, one of our analysts, who is in France, so it's very important for us, because he's living really close what's going on in this country. He's a journalist and researcher. His name is Romain. How do you see these things here in the streets of Paris and France? Tomorrow we will witness this key day for the strengthening or weakening of these mobilizations. I want to know what you think about this. Hey Lucia, how are you? And hello to all our audience. I think we must remember where this movement was born. It was born in the surrounding areas of France, not the main cities, but the small cities, middle-class towns, meaning in the areas or territories that were affected by the neoliberal policies applied for almost 30 years. Many of these towns lost basic services, witnessed a change of model in services, models, and properties. So now the increase of fuel prices was what caused this explosion, the last factor that caused this explosion. This affected unions, parties, and some people that are outside power. In the big cities there have been marches, and especially in Paris. And I think that we must highlight that all of France is angry and is mobilizing like never before. This has never happened before in this scale in the whole country, and now they're protesting due to its anger against this government, but also against the world that this government supports, a world of economical and political elites, a world of savage capitalism. It's important to highlight that this because surely tomorrow we will see a lot of clashes, violence in Paris, and that will have heavy consequences on media, which will try to attack the credibility of this movement due to the violence that we will witness. I'm sure it's going to happen that. But we got to remember that this is not only in Paris, it's in the whole country. We got to check what happens in media and social media, and now I want to call Christian Rodriguez, political analyst, an expert in international relations. Okay, Christian, so what's your opinion on this? We want to know this. What has this movement reached? What's the anatomy of this? Well, thank you, Lucia, for this. I'm so glad to be here today. I also happy to see Romain. What's happening in France? Well, I need you to ask me the question of today. What's the question you have? What are the characteristics and the identity of this movement that spontaneously was born? There is a lot of expectations on tomorrow. Media is also doing what they have to do. We all know what it is. There's a wave of violence, really clear, really obvious, against the Yellow Vests movement in France. So tomorrow it's going to be a really violent day in Paris. Shops are getting closed, the sports will suspend their activities. But these people are answering with what they know, which is violence. They're angry. I'm sure you're aware of these pictures that have turned around the world, where we can see 160 young men from 13 to 15 years old laying in the ground as in the times of dictatorship in Germany or France, and also in Latin America. We've seen this before, this kind of picture. And this government is protected in its palace and is expecting mobilizations for tomorrow to be seized, but they're forgetting that this is a mobilization of the poor people, of the low class. Paris have united and mobilized around the Arc of Triumph to express their violence, but the mobilizations in different sectors of the city have increased. Romain said it well. This started by taxes. Do you remember this phrase saying, work more to earn more, during 2007? But now the people have noticed that they work more and keep working. There is no increase in their wages. They are each time more being stolen. We can see every day that this share of the national wealth is not fair. They're not paying for public services in the way they should. But the money of the people keeps disappearing. But taxes keep increasing. It was one of the promises of Macron to eliminate these increases and to invest more in education, health. But he gave this money to the rich. So people is really angry about this. There are no leaders. This is just a citizen revolution, a real citizen revolution. It's a self-created mobilization that's also fighting against the fierce campaign of media. People are saying that media is saying that the yellow vests are the worst scum in the city. But when we see who are the real dead people here, are only the yellow vests. Is Macron's government at risk? How longer can he keep playing this card of repression and violence? You said that the government is protecting itself in its palace, has left the conditions to use this mobilization to reach the government. Well, this analysis must go beyond right and left, you know. The main thing here is the people and its mobilization, its unity to fight this oligarchy. What is true is that there is a concrete possibility of using this rage against Macron to really kick him out. They really want Macron to leave the government. Macron said that if you want a job, you just have to cross the street and find it, and etc., etc. But that's not true, and now they are protecting themselves in the palace. So if this mobilization successes, they will try to impose an increase in salaries, which is an urgency. The people is starving, as many millions of people in the world, including retirees, which by the end of the month they still need to work and still don't have enough money. We must follow this mobilization deeply, and if the resignation of Macron doesn't occur, they will try to form a constituent assembly. The people is self-administrating, self-managing itself, trying to divide this government, to break this government. So we must think of social consciousness, transformation mobilizations, and social justice against this terror campaign that the government is applying. Romain, we go back to you. The headlines talk about civil war, revolution, but we must highlight this effort to criminalize what's going on in the streets of Paris. If you agree, do you think that social media is more important than the actual media, because that's the way in which they have mobilized and organized? Well, the local media, and when I talk about media, I'm talking about this system in France made by commercial media, financed by private companies, and also public television and radio, which is ruled by this government. So the protection layer that the government is using is neoliberalism and repression. They have spent weeks demeaning the protesters, the yellow vests, calling them fascists and racists. So it is obvious that media is trying to attack these protesters. On one hand, they're trying to attack their credibility, and on the other hand, they're trying to finally hide the causes of this anger that the people is living in France. They're hiding these reasons. They don't talk about the neoliberal policies that were applied that caused this, that are affecting the countryside or the surrounding little towns, not the main cities that much. We can also see that media is accusing and promoting violence against the yellow vests. They're promoting psychoterror in a whole population. The final goal of media is to dismantle the yellow vests. The people is noticing the role of media. That's why I don't think that people will let media success. People took journalists out of the marches. They attacked them and like kicked them out. So there is a reaction against media by these very people. Romain and Christian, thank you very much for this. We'll see you soon. Our two guests were in France. It's important to understand what's going on in France, to see what's going on in the rest of the world. Is this the beginning of a biggest process that can reach other Western countries? Is this a general feeling among EU countries? Is this going to be efficient or not? What can be the role of this movement? We will analyze this in the next block. In the last block of this show, we will be back. Let's talk about the situation in France in regards to its neighbors. The stability and balance of EU can be affected by France. Many other countries throughout history fought the United States, Germany, and France. But from not so long ago, many of these countries are partners now, economically and politically. Let's see. France is an economic power. It's the first agriculture power of the EU. The agriculture sector means 72 million euros of the production of France and its GDP. Macron's government has been called slow and inefficient after not being able of defending its projects and campaign promises. Under the concepts of sovereignty, union, and democracy, he won the people of France, and this pissed off President of the United States, Donald Trump. He also made a call to create a general army of Europe, which also made Trump angry. France and Germany are trying to be the leaders of a bloc that has been stagnated and that now tries to create a union in the continent. After many discussions, Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron presented a plan for the future, as they call it, to start a new era of finance and economic affairs in Europe. They're looking for a common budget for Europe to strengthen up some of the members with weak economies and budgets. We have Eric Splinter in our studio. He is a documentalist and an analyst. Welcome, Eric. Before we talk about the role of France and what its importance in the EU and its sustainability, we want us to talk about the characteristics of this movement that has emerged in France and where can they go, what can they reach. I think that right now, the causes of why this was caused, of how this was born, what some French intellectual called the French V of this stripe of people that are far from reaching basic services in France. Apart from analyzing how it was born, I think we should think about how it evolved. Now, it's not just a movement of young people. It's a movement of the common citizenship. It's the drivers, it's the people, it's the country people. The ones with the yellow vests, were usually common drivers, the common people. And the people are using this as a sign of, a symbol of the union of the citizenship. There are students that are joining these marches, nurses, the middle professional class. The professional middle class in France are joining this. Are them the ones who are protesting, not the elites. In the southeast of France, in the northwest of France, Toulouse, Nice, Dijon, Strasbourg, are cities that have been feeling poverty and getting poorer every time. And that's how it starts. It has gotten a political characteristics, but because there are parties, the Republican Party, the Socialist Party of France, that have joined. The ruling party has 73% of rejection against this. So it's not only a social race, it's also a fight against traditional structures of power. Yeah, because people don't believe that power can solve these problems anymore. And this is also a European phenomenon. And even worldwide, we see that in the United States there were similar movements after the crisis of Wall Street. But here in France, the movements are not only fighting against Macron, they're fighting beyond Macron. I think there are political reasons behind this too. In the European case, we can remember that in Italy there are similar conditions and there could be similar movements there. In Italy they already used weapons, there have been armed movements. So there are consequences for Europe after this. Macron was seen as the liberal leader of Europe, but there has been a lot of talking, but no one is really solving the social problems. He won his government with populism. What's the role of Macron in the region? Well, now France... Well, we gotta remember that Europe has this new problem of social rebellions and movements. And they must keep an eye on that, because there could be more around the continent. France is not the worst one with inequality. You can see England, Spain, other countries. France is not the worst one with the worst conditions. There are also other European countries with people that are not happy with their social conditions. So due to these precise conditions, in regards to the labor reform, the labor law, the university education law, and the increase in the fuel prices, France tries to hide the anger of the citizenship, the anger. People are trying to think that Trump has his hands in this, but we're really forgetting about the real causes, the social causes of this crisis, of this social explosion. There will be violence, yeah, but it is because even media is encouraging violence. They have a weather of civil war. So you think that media have also supported this violence? Yeah, sure. Their headlines encourage this. But it's not true that the movement, that they are a national movement. That is not true. They are a movement that was born outside the traditional structures of the bourgeoisie. But they don't share agendas with socialists or with political parties. There are some right-wing parties that even support them in 90% of their whole. Now, if it is convenient for these parties to bring down the government, that's another thing. I wanted to talk about that. Is it France a key piece in Europe? Yeah. In the new design of the European community and its sustainability, France and Germany are very important. Even with the Brexit crisis, well, on one hand, Europe is facing this social crisis. We're talking about 160,000 people in France, for example. And there are places in different other small towns where mobilizations are smaller, but there are even each time more around the whole country. New unions are joining these mobilizations. There are more people joining this. And the popularity of this movement has not decreased. Its popularity is 73% across the whole country, meaning 7 out of 10 French are supporting this. Also, there is the response of Macron. Macron is in Buenos Aires saying that no, they are criminals and we go and be strong and strict. Well, now we see that it's not like that. He was received in a very clear way of rejection. And someone said that you must be deaf to not to listen to the anger of the French people. If these mobilizations would happen, then they will apply repression in the most fascist way possible. So after the increase of fuel prices, they're justifying this, but it is not only that. We got to think about the 60% of fuel prices that increased that have to do with taxes. Yesterday, we checked that 60% of the fuel price are taxes. Yeah, what you say, yeah. It's not even OPEC prices, it's... Well, people say that OPEC usually make people to pay more for fuel and oil. But it's actually not like that. 60% of its price, it's taxes applied by the government of France. So it has nothing to do with OPEC. Well, the funny thing here is that throughout history, the prices of fuel always increase but never go down. There has never been a decrease in fuel prices. So after this mobilization, the government discovered that it's not popular at all. So if they don't repress the people, then you can just find that this government is weak. We also can talk about that they repress people and trying to kill the popularity of this movement, but that's not possible. In Belgium we also have protests with yellow vests too. There is the 5-star movement also in Italy. There are also conditions in England for these risings. Wait, excuse me. If it is a civil movement, doesn't mean that it is not a political movement. They are not linked to any political party, but it is a political movement. It is totally political. These are movements that, well, according to you, they are involved in politics. Yeah, sure. After the call of the government to negotiate, means that it's too not so much and too late for this, for the government to negotiate. There will be repercussions in Europe. This weakens one of the most important factors of actors of the continent, we gotta think that this is only a French movement, but it is weakening the whole continent. We must think about the role of the alliance between Germany and France. Not so long ago we had a show about this future agreement between these two countries, talked by Macron and Merkel. Some months ago they were talking about this plan to reform EU. So what does this have to do with this? Well, the design of this EU, according to this design, if we consider that, these mobilizations all surely weaken this organization. What is France playing here? What are the cards they're playing, and what are they risking? Even after trying to look for negotiations with Germany and the people of France. What is France risking? Well, first of all, its credibility to be part of, a strong part of EU. A government able to sustain its governability, with weak in citizen popularity rates. How can they rule a whole continent if they cannot rule their own country? In the United Kingdom, we can see similar things. All this Brexit problem is bringing a possibility, not so possible for me, but there is a possibility of dismantling the UK. You can see the problem with Northern Ireland and other little areas in the UK. So in the EU there is a common crisis, social crisis. I want to ask you about the vision of Thierry Meyssan. Western leaders will have to resign to quit their economic system and go back to productive capitalism of the Cold War times, or to create a different organization from which they have thought until now. So the West that have ruled the world for more than 5 centuries will sink due to its conflicts, social conflicts. Well, capitalism shows an optimized picture of itself, but in no country is sustaining. It's being sustained. They were never sustained by being capitalists. We gotta talk about the capitalist hegemonies in the metropolis as part of a system of exploitation in the world. The conservative movement in the US, the models of the first world, they're forgetting that the economic system of the world, the whole economic system, is an exploitation system. Probably they cannot exploit colonies as they used to before, and we might have a different kind of Cold War, but the solutions to these conflicts is not to reform capitalism. They need a different solution that not even North America or Europe are able to reach now. It's curious also to think that in these protests, one of the elements that the people are protesting about is the increase of tariffs for foreigner students, scholarships for foreigner students, the increase in that price. That's also what they're talking about. So this is a world problem. If we go back to productive capitalism, well, I think that its productivity it's basically based on poverty of the rest of the world, of 3/4 of the world. But they're talking about national economy. But when did the economy stop being national? Capitalism works in poverty of the rest of the world. Or is Africa not capitalist? Is the rest of the world not capitalist? It's not about reforming capitalism, it's about thinking that the productive capitalism was productive sometime before, but after reaching poverty for all of South America and Latin America, or the rest, or other areas of the world. So they're based in exploiting the working class of the world. I don't think that capitalism must be reformed to a productive capitalism. I think they're trying to hide the crises of today. I think that in another kind of economy, stability could be reached, but no more with capitalism. Thank you for your time, Eric. It's been a pleasure. Let's go to conclusions now. Another challenge for neoliberalism, which is inefficient. This was born from outside the bourgeois, coming from the countryside and surrounding little towns. It's been important in Paris, but it's not its center. This movement tries to restructure power. We see that media are criminalizing and attacking and hiding the consequences and causes of this movement. This has strong consequences for Europe, which can also affect the US. Europe in this game has new problems, social explosions, in key factors for the European model. Other relationships must be created, and the main leaders of this bloc must think of reforming their policies. Thank you for being with us in this show. We will see you next Monday by Telesur. Have a nice weekend, and until the next time.